Okay, so welcome to CS79 Adobe Illustrator. So the first thing I'm going to do in these lectures is just kind of step you through, what are the sticking points, the things to kind of watch out for. One thing to note with these lectures is I'm not going to go over every single step in the book. You want to watch the lectures, follow along with them, and then actually go through the book and finish the steps that we haven't finished in class. The first ones that we're going to do are pretty simple. The first couple lessons are pretty simple. They'll get more complex as we move through, but again, just make sure you watch the lectures, follow along, and then you also actually go through the book and finish up, the entire thing in the lesson. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the start file for lesson 1, and you'll find that the media files, if you bought the physical version of the book, are in the CD in the back of the book. If you bought the e-version of the book, you'll find a link at the end of the book where you can actually download them through your internet browser. So what I've done is I've already downloaded to my desktop, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up my media file. I'm going to go to lesson 1, and I'm going to find the file called L1 Start, and I'm going to go ahead and double click that to open it in Illustrator. And so we've now, depending on your level of expertise, perhaps open your very first Illustrator document. And let me just move some of these panels off to the side. We'll be customizing the panels that we see on the side. Mine may look just a little bit different than yours. We'll actually be going over that and talking about, what all of the various parts of the interface actually are. And so now that I have my screen resized, I'm going to do the thing that's the most important anytime you open a lesson file, or really anytime that you open any file that you're working on once you're working in projects. You want to go ahead and do a file save as. And so what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Save As, and I'm just going to save mine to the desktop. You should be saving yours to your flash drive. If you're working at your home computer, your hard drive is fine. You just want to make sure you have some sort of backup solution. I'm just going to call mine Demo. And go ahead and once I've given it a new name in the Save As dialog, go ahead and hit Save. And for now, we'll talk a little bit more in more detail about all the saving options in a later lesson. For now, you can just go ahead and hit OK when the Illustrator options come up. So, before we start talking about the demo, I just want to kind of give an idea of what Illustrator is, or how Illustrator is different than, say, an application like Photoshop, which probably a lot of you have heard of or probably used as well. Adobe Illustrator is a program that uses vector graphics to create everything you're seeing. So all the lines and curves that you're seeing are defined by math. So typically the file sizes are much, much smaller than in a program that has resolution dependent or something that's pixel based like Photoshop. So the advantage with working with vectors is that no matter how big or how small you make something, it's going to be as high of quality. So again, with something that is a vector-based drawing program, no matter how big or how small you're actually producing something, it's going to be the same file size. So whether it's something that's the size of a postage stamp, or you're creating some sort of design that's going on the side of a building, same file size. Versus if you're working with something that actually was pixel-based or resolution dependent, if you had something that was, the size of a postage stamp, it would be a very, very small file. If you had something that was going to go on the side of a building, it would be an enormous file. So let's talk a little bit about what we're actually seeing on screen. There are various parts of the program that we're going to talk about, and I'll just kind of point out the areas right now. First up here, you have your application bar. This is sort of a way that you can, use Bridge to open up other programs. You can arrange your documents if you have multiple documents set up, so that you can sort of tile your documents within your view. That's something that's a useful tool. It's probably not something that I use a ton. Something that is very usable or useful is your control panel here. This is context dependent. So depending on what you're looking at, so depending on what you have selected in your interface, this control panel area changes. The next thing, the thing that I talked about a little bit ago, are your panels. These are all of your various sort of kind of options of different things you can do. We'll talk in a lot of detail as we work through the lessons about what these various things do. And again, the number of panels that you have open may be a little bit different than what you're seeing on my screen. And again, we'll learn how to customize those at a later lesson. The tool panel, which we'll talk a little bit about more in this lesson, just all of the various tools that you can use when you're actually creating your designs and creating your drawings. Document window, this area in here where you're actually working on your particular project, so the thing that's actually open up, sort of your workspace. And status bar, which is the information down here, and actually let me zoom in for you. So the information, and again, this is context sensitive as well, so if you have multiple artboards, you can very quickly navigate between artboards. If you want to adjust your zoom level so you can get closer or farther away, this is another area where you can do that. So that's pretty useful as well. So that's kind of, the overall of what you're looking at on screen. The next thing I'm going to show you is just how to start to customize what you're actually looking for. There are a lot of preferences that you can go through and look and sort of, change how you use Illustrator and what you're actually looking at. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually look at the interface itself. So we're going to go ahead and go to, since I'm on a Mac, I'm going to go to Illustrator Preferences and then User Interface. If you're on a PC, this is going to be under the Edit menu. So on a PC, it's going to be Edit, and you'll see Preferences under the Edit menu, and then User Interface. So for me, I'm going to go to Illustrator Preferences, User Interface. And in here, you can actually see that even something down to as simple a level as your user interface you can change. So you can see if I want my interface to be lighter, I want it to not be in quite this dark of a background, I can make my interface much lighter, almost towards white. Or I can make it darker. I prefer working on a darker background myself. Again, this is just sort of your level of comfort. I like a little bit of a darker background. I think it's easier to see the design work. It provides more contrast. But again, you'll sort of find what you like. If you actually want to change your canvas to white, you can do that very easily as well. And we'll talk a little bit in other lessons about what all the other preferences are here. You might take a moment just to kind of look through and see, what sort of things you can change or you can't customize. Go ahead and say OK. We're going to talk a little bit about the tool panel. The tool panel is this actual, all the tools that you can use in your designs. Let me zoom in a little bit for you too. So these are all of the tools that you have at your disposal in your design. Again, with everything else in your interface, you can very easily customize how you see that. So you'll see right now I have mine set up in a double column, especially if you're working on a smaller screen. This is really useful. If you want it to be in a single column, you can very easily change that as well. You'll see there's a little sort of double arrow up in this upper right hand corner. You can see that you can very quickly switch it to just a single column. And again, that's totally preference, how you want to work, what works best for you. Another thing I want to point out about the tools panel is that you'll see a lot of the tools have these little sort of white arrow in the corner. So you'll see on the direct selection tool, there's a little arrow in the corner, the type tool again. When you see that, you know that there are more tools underneath that. So if you click and hold, you'll see that you get a bunch of more options of various tools on there. If, for instance, you're working with a lot of type or You know, a lot of times I'll use this also with the pen tool, and we actually have a whole lesson dedicated to just this tool. You'll see there are a couple of different tools under here. Sometimes you need to switch very quickly between them. You can actually tear off or sort of expand any of these tool panels if you want to have, you know, very quick and easy access to any of the tools that are kind of hidden under that tool. This is another thing to be aware of. Panels on the other side, again, you may be seeing different panels than me. To expand the panel that you see, and actually you may, depending on how you set it up, you may just be seeing icons. If you actually want to see what the panels are called, you can go ahead and drag that out. And to see what any of these panels are, and again, you know, we'll talk quite a bit about what all of these do and the sort of most important ones. You can click any of them and it'll actually show you the various options. It'll bring it out. If you want to pull something out where you're, you know, again, just like with the tools panel, you're actually working a little bit more with that tool or with that panel, you can just go ahead and grab it and just drag it out of your panel, and then it will actually stay open. Whereas you see with the ones that are docked together, you can only have one open at a time. So that's kind of a useful tool. If you want to go ahead and put it back in, you just simply drag it back into the panels until you get this sort of the blue selection and drop it in, and it's back in there. So you'll also find, you know, as you're working with your interface, that maybe you change a bunch of things and, you know, you open a bunch of extra panels and you find that you really want to reset your workspace the way it was. You can do that as well. If you go to your window panel, you'll see, or I'm sorry, window menu, you'll see that you have an option called Workspace. And you have a bunch of sort of options in there. You'll see that there are several sort of pre-made options for you. So if you're doing a bunch of automation, if you're working with layout, painting, printing and proofing, typography, whatever, there are sort of pre-made layouts for you. If you're ever using one of those and you customize a little bit too much and want to reset it, you can simply reset it back to that default. If you find that one of these layouts are something that, you know, you really love and you want to save, you can actually save your workspaces as well. And then another thing, just, you know, generally as you're working in Illustrator, you can bring up context-sensitive menus. So depending on where you're actually clicking in the interface, you're going to get a different menu that comes up. So I'm right-clicking here, or I'm control-clicking if I am on a Mac. And you'll see that as I click around in my document or as I click on my panels, that I get various options. When you're not really familiar with the program, it's a really useful thing, or even a lot of times when you are familiar and you just forget. If you're working with something and you're trying to find a tool or you're trying to find something and you can't quite remember where it is, right-clicking is a good place to start, because a lot of times it'll have sort of a pared down list of your options and it's easier to find the one that you're actually looking for. Because Illustrator also tries to show you, to give you many, many different options in terms of finding whatever tool or whatever you know, option you're trying to find to complete the work that you're doing. So just continuing on with getting to know the work area, one thing obviously you're going to want to do is change your view. So you either want to get closer to the work that you're creating or you want to get farther away. So there's a couple of really easy ways to do that. You'll see that there's actually a view menu in your in the menu bar at the top. If you go to view, you'll see there are options of zoom in and zoom out. If you choose view zoom in, it zooms in to the center of wherever your screen is. If you choose view zoom out, it zooms back out. So, you know, pretty simple. Something else to know on the zoom in and out, which is something that you'll find in all the menu commands, it always gives you keyboard shortcuts for how to do that, not having to go to the menu, because that's something else that you'll find. The more keyboard shortcuts you know, the easier the easier your work's going to be and the faster it's going to be. And it may seem, something simple where you're like, oh, it's just going to save me like a couple of seconds here, a couple of seconds there, but that actually starts to add up, especially when you are working to finish a project on a deadline, or you have a lot of projects that you're trying to juggle. So Command plus or Control plus on a PC, or Command minus on a Mac, or Control minus on a PC will control your zoom in and out as well. So it's another sort of easy way to zoom in and out of your project to get a sense of where you're at and what you're actually seeing. You can also choose the zoom tool. You'll see that in your tools panel, there's actually a zoom tool, which is a magnifying glass. The keyboard shortcut for that is Z, which is, again, zoom for Z. It's pretty easy, but also pretty useful. So if you select your magnifying glass, you can simply click in your document, and it will zoom you in and center on wherever you're clicking. If you want to go ahead and zoom back out, you can hold on a PC, it's the Alt key, or on a Mac, it's the Option key. If you hold that down, you'll see that the magnifying glass changes from a plus in the middle to a minus, and as you click, it will zoom you out instead. The other thing that's really useful about the magnifying glass is that if you find that there's this particular part of your design that you want to zoom in on, you can click and drag a marquee around what you want to zoom in on. And then when you let go, it will actually zoom you in to that part of your design. So again, you just drag a selection rectangle, and it'll fill your screen, which is pretty useful. And then one last way to navigate around your screen, you'll see if you go back to your tools panel that you have another tool called the hand tool. This allows you to just kind of move around in your document without actually changing your zoom level. So I'm going to go ahead and select that tool. And you'll see that as I click and drag around in my document, it just moves around, moves around what I'm actually seeing instead of actually changing my zoom level. And if I'm using some other tool, like let's say I'm drawing with the pen tool or something, and I just want to quickly switch to the hand tool to move to another part of my document, I can just hold down the space bar, and that will give me automatically the hand tool to move wherever it is that I want to move. And once I'm at that spot, I can let go of the space bar, and I'm back to whatever tool I had before. So that's another, again, learning those keyboard shortcuts are something that's going to really speed up your workflow. Alright, and one last thing, talking about rulers, something that especially when you're zooming in and out in your document that's kind of, you can sometimes be disorienting, especially with something that's resolution independent where, it's going to look the same no matter how zoomed in or zoomed out you are rulers. So, getting a sense of scale of actually how big or how small something is really useful. So you'll see that I have rulers along the top edge of my screen and on the left edge of my screen. If you don't see those rulers, you can go ahead and go to View, and then Rulers, and as you turn the rulers on and off, you'll see that it changes from Hide Rulers to Show Rulers. And also Command R will toggle them on and off, which is a really useful shortcut to learn as well. So you want these on. And so again, this just kind of shows you the units of, whatever size document or wherever you're working. So as you zoom in, you'll see that the units along the top actually change, so you know that you're only looking at, a much smaller portion, or as you zoom out, you know that, you're more zoomed out. So it gives you really a sense of scale when you're moving around your document and creating your design. If you wanted to say, by default, your ruler origins are going to start at the top left corner of your selected artboard. And as you move from one artboard to another, you'll see that your origin changes. So as I have this artboard selected, my origin here is 0, 0. And if I look at the other artboard, it's, this appears to start at about 11 1/4. But if I actually select this artboard, you'll see that it too starts at 0, 0. So the rulers are dependent based upon your artboard. But if you want to, for whatever reason, reset your origin point, so reset the 0, 0 point of your ruler, you can do that as well. To do that, you just click sort of in this middle area between the two rulers. Click and drag it to wherever you want your ruler origin to start. And so I'm doing that on this artboard, and you'll see now this artboard, the 0 point starts here, and then the 0 point starts over here. If I have this other artboard selected, you'll see that the origin point for this one is still 0, 0. And then one more thing for this lesson, we're going to talk about arranging multiple documents. So I'm going to go and open up a couple more documents so you can sort of see the way it's laid out when you have more than one document open. I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Open. And then I'm going to navigate to my media file, or my media folder, which I'm blanking on what I called it. Give me a second. Okay. So mine are Adobe Illustrator CS6 CIB lesson files. Again, I'm just going to go to lesson 1. And I'm going to open up L1 Start 2 and L1 Start 3. Go ahead and open them. And you'll see by default, it go ahead and it tabs these other documents. So if I click here, I have L1 Start 1 Demo, which is the one that I'd saved. And now I have L1 Start 2, which is the one of the files I just opened, and L1 Start 3, which is the other file that I opened. And you'll see by default they're tabbed. If you want to go ahead and open them in their own window, you just have to go ahead and click one and drag it out into its own window. When you do that, you'll have two windows open now. If you decide that you really want to have them tabbed again, just go ahead and drag them back until you get that blue rectangle, and it drops it back into the tabbed viewing. You can also change how you see your multiple documents that open at the same time. If we go back to the application bar that we talked about just a couple minutes ago, you can see that right now it's set up so that we're just seeing one document at a time. If for some reason you had multiple versions of a document that you're working on that you wanted to compare, you can go ahead and change how they're tiled. So you wanted a 3-up display, so you wanted to see the three files open on top of each other, you could do that. If you wanted to see them side by side, and again, you're going to have to scroll a little bit to find exactly where each of those documents are. Oh, another sort of useful keyboard shortcut that I find that I use a lot is snap to window. So essentially, wherever you are in your document, if you're on a Mac, if you hit Command 0, if you're on a PC, if you hit Control 0, it will automatically snap your project to fill your screen. So it's kind of nice as you're zooming in and out, or as you're moving around your project, if you just get lost, that will bring you back in. So that's actually quite a useful thing as well. So those are pretty much the main parts of lesson 1, which was getting to know the work area. I've gone over sort of the high points of the lesson. Make sure that you actually go and follow along in the lesson in the book and complete the parts that we haven't completed. And I will see you back in lesson 2.